Leviathan is the Lord of the Seas, and by far the most prolific water summon in Final Fantasy. Often regarded as one of the most powerful summons, second only to Bahamut, Leviathan's temperament and story will vary, but it is universally a dangerous boss and a powerful summon. Leviathan is mentioned throughout the Bible as a great sea creature. Its name in Hebrew means twisting or coiling. Stories of the Leviathan vary between time period and religion, depicting it as either malevolent or benign. In some writings it is a fearsome sea serpent with multiple heads that has or will be killed by God and its flesh served to man. In the Book of Revelations, the Leviathan is mentioned alongside the behemoth as two great beasts of the land and sea, and other writings include a massive bird called Ziz as a beast of the sky. Some religious scholars designate Leviathan as symbolizing one of the 7 deadly sins, envy, and he is one of 7 princes of hell. In other writings, the Leviathan is a creation of God as all things are, and is not particularly evil, though it is still dangerous by its nature as a massive sea serpent. The name is deeply ingrained in human culture, to the point that the word Leviathan is often used as general terminology for any sort of large sea creature. Aside from its biblical namesake, Leviathan draws design elements from Middle Eastern dragons, and particularly Ryujin, the Japanese dragon god of water. Ryujin was able to control the tides and the weather with a pair of magical jewels, lived in a great coral palace where all sea creatures served him, and he was able to shapeshift into human form as a bearded man. Because of ancestral Japan's reliance on the bounties of the ocean to flourish, Ryujin is held in high regard, and it is said the first emperor of Japan was a grandson of Ryujin. In Final Fantasy, Leviathan is a sea serpent with a primarily blue body. Its exact color has varied from deep indigo to teal, and it often incorporates shades of purple and green into its color scheme, particularly on its stomach. Its mouth and fins are shades of white and red, and it has multiple fins running down its length. Its head often has a horned crest or fins extending backwards, and a pair of whisker-like appendages trailing behind it from the corners of its mouth. It may have spikes running down its body, and have wings in addition to its fins. Wings or not, it is not uncommon to depict Leviathan as being able to fly and not being confined to bodies of water. Leviathan's signature attack is variably known as Tidal Wave or Tsunami, which conjures a massive wave of water to crash down on enemies. While this usually deals water elemental damage, in games where water is not recognized as an elemental affinity, Tsunami tends to be non-elemental. In the original Japanese games, Tidal Wave and Tsunami are usually separate abilities. The distinction between them is often that Leviathan uses Tidal Wave when fought as an enemy, and Tsunami when called as a summon. Leviathan is able to use a multitude of other water-themed attacks, including the Water Spell, Aqua Breath, and Whirlpool. It tends to have an affinity for the status ailment Slow, or otherwise have abilities affecting speed, and it is sometimes able to utilize ice spells like Blizzard. More generally, it fights with streams of water or bubbles fired from its mouth, and can swipe its tail at its opponent. Leviathan's gender is often ambiguous. On most occasions where its gender is specified, it is a male, but on a few occasions it has been female. Its relationship with humans varies wildly. Sometimes it is a friendly and benevolent creature, other times it is malicious and hostile. Its hierarchy and power levels relative to other summons have a downward trajectory from its inception. In earlier titles, Leviathan was on a tier of power comparable to Bahamut as one of the highest level summons, but in the PlayStation era its prestige declined to place it more as a mid-ranked summon. More recent games, which tend to feature fewer summons and universally make them more powerful than in past titles, have restored Leviathan to the power levels of the Nintendo era series. Leviathan first appears in Final Fantasy II, not as a summon, but as a dungeon. It attacks the ship Firion and his allies are using to sail to the Mysidian Tower and swallows them, and inside they meet the last of the Dragoons, Rickard Highwind. The party fights their way through Leviathan's innards back to their ship and emerge onto the sea when it opens its mouth again. Leviathan is not faced as a boss. The boss of its interior is the Roundworm. Its presence in Final Fantasy II makes it one of 2 summons to have a prominent presence in the series before summoning became a gameplay mechanic. Appropriately enough, the other is Bahamut in the original Final Fantasy. In Final Fantasy III, Leviathan dwells in Lake Dor, and by sailing over its shadow, the party can enter a small series of caverns and battle Leviathan at the end to obtain it as a summon. As the level 7 summon, Leviathan is second only to Bahamut in power. Its summon attacks are Demon Eye, which inflicts instant death, Cyclone, which deals wind elemental damage to all enemies, and Tidal Wave, which deals water elemental damage to all enemies. Curiously, the Demon Eye ability would return in Final Fantasy V as the summon attack of Catawba Pass, where it inflicts Petrify, and Demon Eye would go on to become Catawba Pass's signature ability. In Final Fantasy IV, Leviathan plays a major story role. Leviathan attacks the party's ship as they sail from Falbul to Baron, and Cecil washes up on the beaches near Mysidia. He later learns from other survivors of the attack that Leviathan swallowed Rydia, and she is presumed dead. Rydia eventually returns as an adult, and she explains that Leviathan is the king of the Eidolons, and he abducted her to take her to the Feymarch, the world of the Eidolons, where she continued to train as a summoner. When the party travels to the Feymarch, they can challenge the queen of the Eidolons, Asura, and defeat her to earn the right to challenge Leviathan. When defeated, Rydia earns the right to summon him, and beating him is necessary to be able to challenge Bahamut on the Red Moon. Leviathan's tidal wave is non-elemental in the 2D versions of the game and water elemental in the 3D remakes. In versions of the game with the Lunar Ruins, Lunar Leviathan is the boss of Palom and Porum's Lunar Trial. A palette swap of Leviathan can be fought in the Lunar Subterrane to earn the Masamune. The boss's name in Japanese is a combination of Tidal and Leviathan, while its English name is Ogopogo, a cryptozoological sea serpent believed to reside in Okanagan Lake in British Columbia, Canada. In the sequel The After Years, the mysterious girl attacks the Feymarch at the start of Rydia's chapter and petrifies Leviathan and Asura and takes control of them. She summons Leviathan against Golbez and Fusoya in the Lunarians chapter, where he is invincible and the two must defeat the mysterious girl to dismiss him. In the final chapter, Leviathan is faced in the depths of the True Moon, and if Rydia is in the party, he will come to his senses when defeated and return to her as a summon. Regaining both Leviathan and Asura is necessary to break the mysterious girl's control of Bahamut later in the chapter and reacquire him as a summon. Without them, Bahamut cannot be obtained. In the 3D remakes of The After Years, which heavily redesigned the final dungeon, Lunar Leviathan appears as a new boss, and drops the hero shield when defeated. Leviathan in Final Fantasy V is mentioned in the Sealed Tome as the King of the Sea. When the party goes to Istory Falls to retrieve one of the tablets needed to release the sealed weapons, one of Exdeath's minions appears to attack them. Leviathan emerges from the waterfall and destroys the demon, and the party can fight him to earn him as a summon. While meeting him is obligatory when retrieving the tablet, actually fighting him is optional. Leviathan is one of the 3 level 5 summons, the other 2 being Bahamut and Phoenix. The Game Boy Advance release of Final Fantasy VI added 4 new Espers to the game, and Leviathan is one of them, based on its Final Fantasy V design. A new scene has an NPC inform the party of a sea creature seen on the ships passing between Nikia and South Figaro, and once they acquire the airship, boarding the ferry between the cities will prompt a cutscene where they are washed overboard to fight Leviathan. The boss fight is also notable for its background. Mog's Water Rondo dance is missable in previous versions of the game, since no battles in the World of Ruin take place in a watery environment. So the Leviathan fight gives players one last chance to learn the dance if they missed it earlier in the game. In the world of Final Fantasy VII, Leviathan is the guardian deity of Wutai, and his summon materia is gifted to Yuffie when she defeats her father in the Wutai Pagoda. One of Leviathan's scales is found in Junon's underwater reactor, and is used to put out fires in the mountains overlooking Wutai to access some treasure chests there. In the very first demo of the game in 1996, Leviathan was equipped on Aerith and was the only summon available to the party. Final Fantasy VII Remake allows players to challenge Leviathan in Shinra's VR battle simulator to earn its materia. Because of its size, Leviathan is only able to be summoned in large, open areas. While it was water elemental in the original Final Fantasy VII, there was no water element in Remake, and so Leviathan is non-elemental. During development, the staff intended to include Rama in the game, since he is a more recurring and famous summon, but they chose to include Leviathan instead as an homage to the 1996 demo, Via Chapter Select, players can replay the raid on the Sector 8 reactor and summon Leviathan, just like they could in the demo. Final Fantasy VIII features Leviathan as a guardian force that can be drawn from Norg. He is a supportive GF, with abilities to boost spirit, the command ability Recovery which heals HP, junctions to elemental attack and defense, and refinement abilities that create support and medicinal items. His Tsunami attack in this game has a chance to wash away certain smaller enemies, removing them from battle and instantly killing them. Leviathan once again features in a demo for the game, which has players play through the Dalit mission with Rinoa in the party. Leviathan is the only GF the party has access to and is equipped on Rinoa. Final Fantasy IX gives Leviathan a minor story role. According to Ico, long ago the summoners of Madain Sori failed to summon Leviathan and sealed it away in a statue near the Aoife tree, using it to create a barrier that only allowed summoners near the tree. Ico has to ask Leviathan's spirit permission to allow them to enter, and upon exiting the party witnesses an impending confrontation between Kuja and Queen Braun. Fearing for her mother, Garnet goes to the statue of Leviathan, who up until now had not been identified by name, and prays to it. Though Garnet receives the aquamarine jewel to call Leviathan, she realizes what the Eidolon is and that it would be of no help in a battle between Kuja's dragon and an airship fleet. A design document released by Hironobu Sakaguchi hints Leviathan had a much larger role earlier in development. On the original website for her studio Mistwalker, Sakaguchi posted an early version of Final Fantasy IX's script covering part of the opening. When Garnet passes by Zidane in disguise as a white mage, he sees the pendant she's wearing and realizes she is the princess he is supposed to kidnap, since her pendant is the blue stone of Leviathan that belongs to the royal family. In the final game, Garnet's pendant is one of 4 fragments of the summon stone for Alexander. Given the context in which Alexander is summoned, defending Alexandria from Bahamut, it is dubious that Leviathan would have been called for the same purpose, so it seems the story of Final Fantasy IX was a bit different at this point in development. Leviathan in Final Fantasy XI is the celestial avatar of water. According to legend, he was a great sea serpent who prowled Gugru Sea, enraged over the development of sea commerce. The hero VIII sailed to negotiate with Leviathan, but his first mate initiated an attack on the serpent before they could speak. VIII offered his life to Leviathan to spare his crew, and they fled while VIII leapt into the sea to fight Leviathan himself. On their return home, the first mate took credit for killing Leviathan, until the next day when the serpent's remains washed up on shore with VIII's sword stuck in its skull. With its last moments, Leviathan returned to VIII's home to ensure his feat would be remembered. The goddess Altana raised the two to the heavens, moved by VIII's courage and Leviathan's gesture. This is why the brightest star in the constellation Leviathan is named VIII. When summoned, Leviathan attacks with water spells and can use Tidal Wave as its astral flow ability. Leviathan is the namesake of an airship in Final Fantasy XII. The dreadnought Leviathan is the flagship of Judge Geese, commander of the 8th Imperial Region, and is his primary form of transportation. It, along with the rest of Geese's fleet, is obliterated in an explosion caused by an experiment involving Nethicite. In Revenant Wings, Leviathan is the rank 3 melee water summon, with an appearance quite different from other incarnations, including having feet. It dwelled in Lemurs in the Mira Kahak Sky Sea, a floating island with a massive ocean, until the Sky Sea was destroyed by Bahamut and the Judge of Wings. Leviathan can be found on one of the smaller floating islands that resulted from the Sky Sea's destruction, where he can be challenged and defeated to add him to the Ring of Pax. Its basic attack is Barracuda Dive, and its special attack is Tsunami. Leviathan is mentioned in the Final Fantasy XIII trilogy as a foul sea responsible for purifying Cocoon's water supply. There is also an area in Eden named for Leviathan, as several areas in the city are named after recurring summons. Concept art depicts Leviathan as a massive creature with humans standing inside its body, which are described as dancing in a parade. It's possible that this was intended to be seen in the Nautilus amusement area, but was dropped. In Final Fantasy XIV, Leviathan is the primal of the Sahagin beast tribe. Both Leviathan and Titan were intended to appear in the game's original incarnation before its relaunch, but because of the Japanese tsunami and earthquake disaster of 2011, they were left out. In A Realm Reborn, Leviathan was added in patch 2.2 as part of the main questline. Leviathan has enthralled numerous pirates to raid supply ships for crystals, which the Sahagin use in a ritual to empower Leviathan so he can create a massive tidal wave to destroy human cities. The adventurer sails out to confront Leviathan using a special ship, the War Leader, outfitted with crystals that weaken Leviathan for a more even battle. Leviathan attacks with both its head and its tail, which are separate targets that share a health pool. The head reflects ranged attacks and the tail reflects magic attacks. Leviathan will conjure entities to drain the power from the device protecting the ship, and if its energy falls below 30%, then its tidal wave can wash characters off the ship and out of battle. The expansion Shadowbringers has the adventurer travel to the First, a parallel world destroyed in a flood of light. To restore the world, new primals are created for each element, including a new incarnation of Leviathan. The major difference between the original and the new Leviathan is that this one has 2 heads. The reason for the change is that these new primals are created based on the adventurer's memories of them, which may have been distorted and mixed with their encounters of other water-based creatures. Leviathan in Final Fantasy XV played a prominent role in the game's marketing, being a focus of the trailer that revealed the game's rebranding from Final Fantasy vs. XIII. According to director Hajime Tabata, Leviathan was one of the first summons designed for the game, though it's unclear if he means vs. XIII or XV. Leviathan in this title is a female and is wrathful and arrogant, demanding reverence and respect from humans. When Lunafreya awakens Leviathan to form a covenant with Noctis, she insists on testing his power in battle. Noctis falls before Leviathan and the Niflheim Empire attacks her, causing her to go on a rampage. Lunafreya uses her powers as Oracle to awaken the sleeping royal arms and grant Noctis the full power of the Armiger, which he uses to battle Leviathan and severely wound her. Titan, whom Noctis had already formed a covenant with, appears to battle Leviathan, and she is eventually defeated and forms a covenant with Noctis. Leviathan is more likely to be summoned when Noctis is in the danger state, but only if the party is in an open area with a large body of water nearby for her to manifest from. As the most iconic water-themed summon, Leviathan is a mainstay in spin-offs featuring summons. It appears in Tactics, Dimensions, Dimensions 2, Dissidia NT, Explorers, Brave Exvius, World of Final Fantasy, and others. However, it is not as common as some other summons like Ifrit or Bahamut. In Brave Exvius, as a dual reference to Final Fantasy III and Final Fantasy VII, Leviathan dwells in Lake Dor and is the guardian deity of the Acropolis Aldurion. Characters in the game refer to Leviathan with both male and female pronouns, as it is able to change how its worshippers perceive it. Leviathan does not appear directly in Final Fantasy Type 0, but is mentioned in lore as a verboten eidolon, the strongest eidolons that require hours and the sacrifice of many summoners to invoke. World of Final Fantasy lists Leviathan as one of Pleiad's 7 powerful creatures that served Lan and Rain in the past, that are all recurring summons. She is once again a female and is once again a more gentle and humorous Esper than in other titles. She is called out to battle by Ferris and Sildra, as Ferris believes Leviathan killed her great-grandfather in Sildra's clan. In actuality, Leviathan aided the Tycoon ancestors when they were attacked by Bismarck, but did nothing for them after that. Leviathan felt no obligation to serve the Tycoons either way, so she aided them on a whim and then left the Tycoons to whatever may befall them next. Nonetheless, she feigns defeat so Ferris can have the satisfaction of avenging her family. The game explains that Leviathan has a hatred for Bismarck, a jab at Bismarck being another recurring creature and summon associated with water. Leviathan's profile also pokes fun at her frequently being overshadowed by Bahamut. In the 4 Heroes of Light, Leviathan has quite a different appearance that emphasizes its biblical influence as a demonic force with multiple heads. Leviathan reappears with this design in the Bravely spin-off series as one of the Nemesis bosses, which are based on the 7 princes of Hell like Mammon and Asmodeus. In Theatrhythm All-Star Carnival, Leviathan is the pre-designated eidolon associated with Rydia, Ferris, Rinoa, Seymour, and Ishtola. In Final Fantasy Record Keeper, Leviathan is the rank 6 Magicite boss, and its imagery is used in Rydia and Yuffie's Soul Breaks. In Super Smash Bros., Leviathan is one of the summons that appears in the Midgar stage, and it creates a tidal wave to flood the arena and wash away any fighters that fall off the main platforms. Thank you to everyone for watching. Remember to like and subscribe for more lore Final Fantasy in the future, and stop by the community tab on my channel to vote on the next subject.